Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm responding on behalf of the Government on this issue tonight, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr, for securing this important and timely debate. Let me address the House this evening by first setting out the Government's policy and then setting out the Government's approach to transparency that formed a key part of my honourable friend's contribution. It is accepted on all sides of this House that, as the Government has made clear, what was witnessed on the 7th of October 2023 was not an act of liberation but an act of barbarism by Hamas. And over the many months of this conflict, the UK Government has made the case for an immediate ceasefire, the release of all the hostages detained, the protection of civilians, access for aid and aid workers to Gaza, and the need for a path to long-term peace and security in the region. So the responsibility of Hamas is clear, but so too is the appalling humanitarian crisis which has since unfolded in Gaza as a result of Israel's subsequent actions. The way in which Israel is conducting its operations is indefensible, disproportionate, and, in the view of the UK Government, counterproductive to any lasting peace settlement. The Government's policy remains that the only way to secure peace and stability is through an immediate ceasefire, the release of the hostages held captive by Hamas, the protection of civilians, and the lifting of all Israeli restrictions on aid being sent into Gaza. Last month, at the United Nations Security Council, the UK Government made the case for urgent humanitarian aid to enter Gaza and expressed our outrage at both the killing of Palestinian Red Crescent workers and the strikes on the UN Office for Project Services compound in March. We also issued a statement with 27 international partners on the mechanisms needed to deliver those vital aid supplies. And together with the leaders of France and Canada, we made clear our strong opposition to the latest expansion of Israel's military operations. Let me make a little progress and then I'll be open to interventions. Let me turn next to the actions taken by this Government in support of these statements. We have supported the restoring of funding for UNRWA. We have suspended arms licences. We have provided £129 million in humanitarian assistance to the occupied Palestinian territories in the last financial year, and the Government has decided to suspend negotiations on the upgraded free trade agreement with this Israeli Government. I give way.
Appreciate the Minister giving way. Last week, the week before last, the Foreign Minister said that we were suspending arms negotiation with the Israeli government. Yet just last week, we had a trade envoy, Lord Austin, visiting Israel, saying how wonderful it was to be there. Can the Minister please explain how those two matters do not contradict each other?
So there are long-standing relationships of trade and economics with Israel, including, for example, as I understand, 1 in 8 of the prescribed drugs available through the National Health Service being provided by an Israeli company. So we have taken a clear position of not upgrading the free trade agreement, but recognising, for example, that those supplies are important. In terms of the trade envoy roles, that's a role that is accountable to the Secretary of State in the Department of Business and Trade, and we were clear that he would not directly deal with the Israeli government when he was there and has no responsibility for the free trade agreement negotiations that would otherwise have been taking place in the coming months. Let me turn now to the specific issue. Let me make a little more progress and then I'll be happy to take further interventions. Let me turn next to the specific issue of export licences. On coming into office, the Foreign Secretary commissioned an immediate assessment into Israel's compliance with international humanitarian law. It was on the basis of this assessment that on the 2nd of September last year, we suspended arms export licences for items to the IDF that could be used in military operations in Gaza. As a result of this decision, licences were suspended for a range of military equipment, stopping the export of F-16 fighter aircraft components, of targeting systems, and of licensable parts that make unarmed aerial vehicles. This measure is still in place, and I would like to reiterate that based on our current assessment of potential breaches of international humanitarian law, we are not licensing military equipment provided directly to the IDF that could be used for military operations in Gaza. It is right to acknowledge that our export licences granted in relation to Israel cover a wider remit than simply those items that may be used in Gaza. There are a relatively small number of licences for the IDF relating to equipment which we assess would not be used in the current conflict, including, for example, parts for air defence systems that defend Israel from acts such as the major aerial attack from Iran in April of 2024. We also think it is right for us to continue providing military-grade body armour used by non-governmental organisations and journalists, and to provide parts of the supply chain which are ultimately re-exported back out of Israel to support the defence of our NATO allies. This government is fully committed to upholding our responsibilities under domestic and international law, and has acted in a manner consistent with our legal obligations, including under the Arms Trade Treaty and the Genocide Convention. On the global F-35 programme, we are, of course, facing a critical moment of European security, with war on the continent at our neighbours' doorsteps. Undermining the F-35 programme at this juncture would, in the view of the government, disrupt international peace and security, NATO deterrence, and European defence as a whole. In relation, let me fulfil the explanation and then I'll be happy to take interventions. In relation to components for the F-35 aircraft, our exporters provide these to a global spares pool and the common production line for new aircraft, where they have no sight and no control over the specific ultimate end users for their export. Put plainly, it is not possible to suspend licensing of F-35 components for use by one F-35 nation without ceasing supply to the entire global F-35 programme. It was therefore judged necessary by the government to exclude F-35 components from the scope of the suspension. But let me be very clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK government is not selling F-35 components directly to the Israeli authorities, and the licence that allows the export of F-35 components was amended in September to specifically make clear that direct shipments to Israel for use in Israel are not permitted. I make way.
The honourable member mentioned about the red lines that the government has. The Secretary of State for Business and Trade said that there were red lines that would make the government stop sending F-35 parts. But the Minister has just been very clear that it's not possible to stop sending F-35 parts. If the Secretary of State for Business and Trade says that there's red lines, and how are we not at those red lines at this point, given what is happening in Gaza, what exactly is going on here?
Deputy Speaker, we are not directly sending parts to Israel for the F-35s. We are continuing to support the global component pool of the F-35 programmes for the reason that I set out in my remarks, which is we judge as a government that there is a material risk to the security of our NATO allies and more broadly to European security if the F-35, an aircraft that is used by a number of our allies, was no longer able to secure the supplies and therefore the aircraft were no longer able to fly. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the Minister giving way. I just want to understand who is making the rules over the spare parts pool. Surely, if we are trading into that pool, we have got a right to set the rules. And if those components are going on to F-35s being bought by Israel, we have a right to block those parts or to kick Israel out, as we did in 2019 with Turkey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we make approximately 15% of the components that contribute to the F-35 programme, but the F-35 programme is an international programme of which we are but one partner. We continue to supply this programme because our judgment as a government is not doing so would undermine the continuing functioning of the F-35 programme, which, as I say, in the government's view, is of critical importance both to European and global security. I have given way a number of times on this point. I'm keen to make a little progress. The government has made these judgments calmly and soberly and will continue to do so with full awareness of our responsibility. Madam Deputy Speaker, I turn now to the question of transparency. As the UK government, we publish quarterly official statistics and an annual report about export licences granted and refused. We provide a searchable database allowing users to produce bespoke reports drawing on this data, and we are committed to openness on strategic export licensing, which provide the means for Parliament and the public to hold us to account. However, I'm keen to make a little more progress and then I'll take further interventions. These are exceptional circumstances, and so as a government, we have heard requests from honourable members on both sides of the House to release further details, including information on licence applications in progress and as full information as we can disclose on the types of equipment that are covered by each extant licence. Recognising the exceptional nature of this issue and the importance of providing transparent and robust information to ensure Parliament and the public can hold the government to account, in December we laid in the Library of the House an exceptional release of export licensing data focused specifically on Israel, plainly setting out how many licences remained extant at that time, how many had been granted since June 2024, and how many had been refused. To summarise that release, I wish to assure members of this House that remaining licences relate to either non-military items, military items for civilian use, or items not for use in military operations in Gaza. These licences also extend to components in items for re-export to other countries, that is, those then that leave Israel. Ongoing licensing applications are also decided on this basis. In fact, of the 352 licences extant to Israel, as of the 6th of December, 191 related to non-military licences. These included components of commercial aircraft components, equipment for private manufacturing firms, and parts for submersible vessels for use in scientific research. That left 161 licences relating to military equipment. However, of these, less than half related to the Government of Israel or the IDF. Instead, most related either to UK components that private Israeli companies would incorporate before re-exporting an item to a third country, or related to military-grade equipment for civilians, such as body armour for journalists and NGOs, as I have already mentioned. I can advise the House that recent reporting on this topic does not provide distinctions between items for civilian and military use, or items remaining in Israel, or for re-export. The UK is not allowing the direct export of arms for use in Israel's military operations in Gaza. I will give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and he's giving a detailed response. To take the Minister back to the point of the international pool of F-35 spares, is it the government's contention that a conditional licence is impossible? That is, that we can provide F-35 spares on the basis of conditional licence, that they are not then sent to Israel to be used in Gaza?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I am acutely conscious of the time. The exclusion from the suspension decision for F-35 components should not in principle apply to licences for F-35 components which could be identified as going to Israel for use by Israel. Exports of F-35 components directly to Israel are therefore suspended unless these are for re-export. But let me return to the specific point, which I know has been a subject of much scrutiny in relation to recent reporting outside of this House. The majority of military licences approved last year are from components of military items for re-export to third countries, including to the UK's NATO allies. Of around 142 million's worth of military goods licensed for Israel in 2024, the vast majority of that overall value was supporting the production of items for use outside of Israel. This includes more than £120 million, or around 85% of the total licence value, for components to support exports of military items from Israeli companies to a single programme for a NATO ally. Madam Deputy Speaker, these remaining licences have no utility in military operations in Gaza. The suspension of such licences was not required by our export licence criteria and would have done nothing except harm UK companies and UK businesses engaged in authorised and legal trade. Since September, we have refused all licence applications for military goods that might be used by Israel in the current conflict, in line with the suspension decision. More applications were refused in 2024 than in the preceding 4 years combined.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.